Introduction. Introduction. A hidden city can survive any enemy except the one it refuses to see. High in the encircling mountains of Fall of Gondolin stood, untouched by time, a white flame of hope against Morgoth's spreading darkness. Its people believed secrecy was immortality. They were wrong. The Fall of Gondolin is a tragic legend of beauty, built in defiance and destroyed by pride, betrayal, and fate. Guided by the will of Ulmo, the mortal tour journeys to the secret elven city and becomes both witness and participant in its glory and ruin. This is not merely a tale of a city's destruction, but of warnings ignored, love tested by doom, and courage that shines brightest at the edge of annihilation. Love this video, so subscribe, like, comment, and share. Hit the bell to stay updated with every new upload. Chapter 1. The Doom of the North. The North had once believed itself unconquerable. For centuries the elves held Morgoth at bay with valor, vigilance, and the unspoken faith that light, once kindled, could never truly be extinguished. But the Dagor Brogalach, the Battle of Sudden Flame, shattered that belief. Rivers of fire poured from Thengaradrim, and the long siege of Angband ended in terror and ruin. Fortresses fell, banners burned, and the land itself seemed to recoil from the fury unleashed upon it. From that day onward, fear walked openly in belief. Morgoth's power no longer crept in whispers. It marched in flame and shadow. Dragons stirred in their deep pits. Balrogs roamed beneath black banners. And Orcos multiplied like a spreading plague. The free peoples did not lack courage, but courage alone could not restore what had been lost. Kingdoms that once stood proud now survived only by secrecy or distance, clinging to the last fragile hopes of Among these hidden realms, Gondolin stood supreme and untouched, raised by Turgon, son of Fingolfin. The city was carved in secrecy from a ring of encircling mountains. Its white towers gleamed in a valley unseen by enemy eyes, and its people believed that concealment was stronger than steel. While other realms burned, Gondolin slept in peace, protected by silence, memory, and pride. Yet even in safety, unease stirred like a distant echo beneath the stones. Messengers came rarely to Gondolin, and when they did, their tidings were grim. The fall of Fingon, the ruin of Nargothrond, the doom that clung to the House of Hador. These were not merely stories of defeat, but warnings written in blood. Still, Turgon's people turned inward, trusting the walls they could see more than the fate they could not. Time passed gently within the city, and with comfort came complacency. Far from Gondolin's hidden gates, the wider world suffered. Men were driven from their lands, enslaved or scattered. Elves fled into forests or westward to the sea, carrying songs of sorrow instead of victory. The balance of power shifted decisively toward darkness, and Morgoth, though not yet victorious, grew bolder with each passing year. He learned patience, and in patience he learned how hope decays. It was in this age of loss that fate began to weave a different thread, fragile and mortal. While armies clashed and kings debated, a child was born whose life would touch the destiny of Gondolin. His name was Tuor, and though he was only one among many suffering souls of men, the Valar themselves had marked his path. For when the great powers move, they often choose the smallest hands to carry their will. The doom of the North was not a single moment, but a slow closing of possibilities. Each year narrowed the roads of escape. Each defeat deepened the silence of the hidden city. Gondolin believed itself apart from this fate. Yet doom does not announce itself with trumpets. It arrives through neglect, through warnings dismissed, through the belief that yesterday's safety guarantees tomorrow's survival. Thus the world stood at the opening of this tale. Darkness advancing, hope retreating, and a city of unmatched beauty waiting unknowingly for the hour when secrecy would no longer be enough. The Fall of Gondolin did not begin with fire or betrayal, but with a choice made long before swords were drawn, the choice to trust walls over wisdom. Chapter 2. Tuor. Son of What shapes a true hero? Noble birth, great victories, or the quiet strength to endure when the world collapses? Long before Tuor lifted a sword or heard the call of the Valar, his life answered this question through loss, exile, and survival. Leadership, after all, is not forged in comfort, but in endurance. Tuor was born into tragedy. He was the son of Huer of the House of Hador, a line known for loyalty to the elves and defiance of mortals. His father fell in the Nirneath Arnodiad, standing firm beside Húrin, while hope itself seemed to drown in blood. This loss defined Tuor before he could even understand its meaning. He inherited no crown, no army, only a legacy of courage and sacrifice. From the beginning, Tuor's life showed that true strength is not inherited power, but the will to stand after everything has been taken. After Huer's death, Tuor's mother, Rian, was consumed by grief. Her search for her husband ended in madness and disappearance, leaving Tuor alone in a broken land. He was taken in by wandering elves of Mithrim, who raised him with compassion but could not protect him forever. From them, Tuor learned the elvish tongue, the patience of the wild, and the sorrow that lived in every song of the north. These early years passed quietly, yet beneath the calm grew a restlessness. A Stuktor, a spirit, resisted stillness. That restlessness soon met cruelty. Captured by Easterling traders who served Morgothor, was enslaved and driven into harsh labor. Chains replaced freedom, and commands replaced choice. Yet even in bondage, Tuor did not surrender his sense of self. Pain hardened his resolve, instead of breaking it. Suffering carved clarity into his character. He learned that darkness thrives where people submit, and that survival itself can be an act of defiance. Tuor's escape was not merely a physical flight. It was a transformation. Alone and hunted, he fled westward into the empty lands of Never. Ruined halls and silent shores became his companions. Here, memory and silence taught him more than any mentor could. He learned to listen to the wind, the waves, and the deeper call moving beneath them. His life of loss connected him to the wider fate of Middle-earth, preparing him for a purpose larger than revenge or survival. Unseen Ulmo, Lord of Waters, had long watched him. Unlike the other Valar, Ulmo never abandoned through rivers, rain, and the restless sea. He guided fate quietly. In Tuor, Ulmo saw strength without pride and courage, without hunger for power immortal, shaped by hardship yet unbroken by it. Dreams began to trouble Tuor's sleep. White towers rose from hidden valleys, and a voice echoed with command rather than comfort. Storms drove him always toward the western shores, as if the sea itself shaped his road. Fear followed these signs, yet Tuor did not turn away. Because loss had already stripped him of illusion, he understood that some calls cannot be ignored. Thus Tuor's path bent toward destiny, shaped not by glory, but by hardship, preparing him to carry a warning that would one day test the fate of Gondolin itself. Chapter 3. The Voice of Ulmo. What does it truly mean to be chosen not to rule, but to bear responsibility when silence would be safer? Imagine a lone man standing on a storm-beaten shore, waves crashing like unanswered questions, while one calm yet terrible voice rises from the deep. Leadership is not about titles. It is about action taken when fear offers comfort. Tuor had wandered the empty lands of Nevrast for years, but now the land itself seemed awake. The wind no longer merely passed over him. It pressed against his back, urging him forward. The sea did not simply roar. It spoke in rhythms that pulled at his heart. Moreover, the ruined halls of Vinyamar no longer felt abandoned. They stood like witnesses, as though stone and shadow remembered promises made long before Tuor's birth. As the storm gathered, the waters rose, and from them came Ulmo, Lord of Waters. His presence was vast, filling sky and sea alike, yet his voice was clear, shaped by purpose rather than anger. Terror seized Tuor, but he did not flee. Years of loss had already stripped fear of its power over him. Because leadership demands clarity and courage, Tuor stood and listened. Ulmo spoke of Gondolin, the hidden city of unmatched beauty and growing danger. Secrecy, once its greatest strength, had hardened into pride. The world beyond its walls burned. Yet Gondolin listened only to echoes of its own safety. Ulmo's command was not wrapped in comfort. Tuor must go to Gondolin and warn King Turgon that concealment alone could not defeat fate. Truth, even when unwelcome, was the only defense left. This charge formed the backbone of Tuor's destiny. He was not chosen because he was mighty, but because he had endured without bitterness. Because he had known slavery, he understood the cost of submission. Because he had wandered alone, he had learned to listen. Every hardship became evidence, every wound an argument proving why he alone could carry this message. Therefore, Tuor's life was revealed not as misfortune, but as preparation. Azumo spoke Tuor, saw the chain of cause and effect binding his past to the future. Because Gondolin ignored warnings, it would fall. Because Tuor listened, hope still had a path. His mortal life became a bridge between divine will and elvish pride, between doom and the chance of survival. The weight of responsibility pressed upon him. Yet it did not crush him. Purpose, unlike fear, gives strength. When Ulmo withdrew, the storm eased, but the silence left behind was heavier than thunder. Tuor knew that wandering had ended. Each step he would now take carried consequence. He did not know whether Gondolin would listen, nor whether he would survive the telling. But leadership does not ask for certainty, it demands commitment. Tuor turned toward the hidden mountains, understanding that the hardest task is not fighting an enemy, but speaking truth to those who feel safe. If the world is to be saved from ruin, someone must choose action over silence. Leadership begins with listening, and courage begins the moment we act on what we hear. Chapter 4. The Hidden Way. What gives a place its power? The walls that protect it, or the secrecy that keeps it unseen? Imagine a road so carefully guarded that even hope must walk it blindfolded, trusting in others' steps more than its own sight. Leadership, once again, is not about control, but about trust placed in the right moment. Tuor did not set out alone. From the grey shores of Navarst, he was joined by Varanwu, an elf of Gondolin, spared from death by Ulmo's will and bound by gratitude to serve as guide. Their meeting was no accident. Because fate often works through quiet companionship, the burden of Tuor's task was shared, if not lightened. Together they turned eastward, leaving the sound of the sea behind for the long silence of stone. The journey was hard and unforgiving. Mountains rose like walls against the sky, and narrow passes tested both strength and patience. Moreover, the land itself seemed wary, as though it questioned whether these two were worthy to pass. Tuor followed Varanwu without knowing the path, surrendering control step by step. In contrast to the wandering of his earlier life, this road demanded discipline and faith. Each turn reinforced a simple truth. Leadership sometimes means following before one can lead. At last, they came to the Hidden Way, the secret road carved through rock and guarded by vigilance older than memory. Here, Gondolin's greatest defense revealed itself, not its towers, but its caution. Gate after gate rose before them, each more concealed than the last, each demanding proof rather than promises. Words, signs, and silence were all tested. Because secrecy had preserved the city for centuries, trust was given sparingly and only through ritual. As they passed the 7 gates, Tuor felt both awe and unease. The craftsmanship was flawless, the order precise, yet something troubled him. Strength built entirely on concealment risks, forgetting the world beyond its walls. This realization did not weaken his resolve. It sharpened it. The beauty of Gondolin, he sensed, was real, but so was its danger. When at last the valley opened before him, Tuor beheld Gondolin in full splendor. White towers caught the light like living flame, and fountains sang in stone-paved streets. Peace lay upon the city like a dream, untouched by war. Yet because Tuor carried the voice of Ulmo within him, he saw more than beauty. He saw a city listening only to itself. This passage into Gondolin was more than a physical crossing. It marked the turning point where warning met comfort, and truth approached pride. Tuor had followed the Hidden Way faithfully. Now he would have to walk a far harder path, alone, the road of speaking what others did not wish to hear. If leadership is measured by courage, then the greatest test is not entering a protected place, but challenging the beliefs that protect it. The gates of Gondolin closed behind Tuor, but the true gates, those of the mind and heart, were still waiting to be opened. Chapter 5. The Glory of Gondolin. What happens when beauty lasts so long that it begins to feel eternal? Imagine a city so untouched by war that danger feels like an old myth, repeated but no longer believed. Comfort, when mistaken for safety, can quietly become the greatest threat of all. Gondolin received Tuor with courtesy and wonder. News of a mortal man passing the 7 gates spread quickly through the white streets, and eyes followed him with curiosity rather than fear. The city lived in harmony and order, its people skilled in craft, song, and lore. Moreover, time itself seemed gentler here. While the outer world bled and burned, Gondolin breathed peace, protected by mountains and the faith that secrecy would endure forever. King Turgon ruled with wisdom shaped by memory and sorrow. He had built Gondolin as an answer to loss, a refusal to surrender beauty to darkness. Yet years of safety had softened even his vigilance. When Tuor spoke of Ulmo's warning, Turgon listened with respect but not with urgency. He believed that what had preserved Gondolin for centuries would preserve it still. Because the city had never fallen, it felt immune to falling at all. Tuor sensed the subtle danger beneath the splendor. The towers were strong, the people loyal, yet their confidence rested on the past rather than preparation for the future. In contrast to the suffering he had known, this comfort felt fragile. He understood that leadership does not fail through cruelty alone. It often fails through delay. When warnings are heard but not acted upon, time itself becomes an enemy. Among the people of Gondolin, however, not all were blind to fate. Idril Celebrindal, daughter of Turgon, listened to Tuor with clear eyes and quiet attention. She did not dismiss the warning, nor did she speak rashly. Wisdom, she knew, often works in silence. Because she understood that cities can fall, even when walls stand firm, she began to prepare for an end no one else wished to imagine. Days passed in calm, and Gondolin continued in its rhythm of peace. Songs were sung, festivals held, and work carried on as though the world beyond the mountains no longer existed. Yet Tuor felt the weight of time pressing forward. The message had been delivered, but its acceptance remained uncertain. Leadership, he realized, is not only about speaking truth, is about acting before certainty arrives. The glory of Gondolin was real and deserved. But glory without humility invites blindness. As Tuor walked its streets, he understood that the city's greatest strength and greatest weakness were the same. The belief that beauty could be preserved by hiding it from the world. If we allow comfort to replace awareness, we risk mistaking peace for permanence. Gondolin stood at the height of its splendor, unaware that this very moment when all seemed safe was the beginning of its greatest test. Chapter 6. Idril, what does foresight look like when all around you feels secure? Imagine seeing cracks in a wall no one else notices, yet knowing that the collapse could come at any moment. True wisdom often whispers, while comfort shouts. Idril Celebrindal, daughter of Turgon, moved through the white streets of Gondolin with eyes both joyful and observant. She loved her city, yet she loved the people enough to notice their blind spots. She saw how years of peace had dulled vigilance, how laughter sometimes replaced watchfulness, and how the hidden threats beyond the mountains were underestimated. Because she combined insight with care, she understood that beauty alone could not shield her people from fate. Tuor's arrival had already planted seeds of caution. His tales of Ulmo's warning resonated with Idril, not as a prophecy to fear, but as a challenge to act. She began to plan quietly, forging a hidden passage within the city, a secret way that could carry the inhabitants to safety if disaster struck. Each stone she inspected, each tunnel she imagined, strengthened her resolve. In contrast to those who rested in complacency, Idril prepared for a future they refused to consider. Her love for Tuor deepened, born not only from admiration, but from shared understanding. They spoke little of fear. Words were unnecessary. They understood that courage is often silent, and action unseen. Moreover, her foresight was not born of paranoia, but of responsibility. She knew that a city's pride could be a trap, and that leadership sometimes demands anticipating danger before it arrives. Despite her secret preparations, Idril remained graceful in public life. She attended feasts, joined councils, and maintained the harmony of Gondolin's daily rhythm. Yet beneath the laughter and light, her mind worked steadily, always returning to what must be done if the walls were breached. Because she alone combined insight with subtle action, hope persisted even as shadows grew beyond the mountains. Idril's choices highlight the quiet power of vigilance and preparation. Whereas others relied on walls and tradition, she relied on foresight and adaptability. Her actions demonstrate that leadership is not always about command or recognition, but about ensuring survival when all else seems safe. Through her care, the hidden city retained a thread of hope. The future remained uncertain, yet Idril's wisdom illuminated a path through the inevitable darkness. If we value beauty, it must be paired with vigilance. If we cherish peace, it must be guided by foresight. Idril's courage reminds us that true leadership prepares for what cannot yet be seen, and acts before calamity forces it into being. Chapter 7. The Gathering Shadows. How can one recognize the first stirrings of doom when all seems serene? Imagine the sky gradually darkening, not with storm, but with the subtle shift of winds and shadows, barely noticed until they dominate everything. While Gondolin thrived in its hidden valley, beyond the mountains the servants of Morgoth stirred. Orcs, spies, and malice moved silently, gathering strength. Every battle fought elsewhere in Beleriand sent ripples that the hidden city could not ignore. Yet many within the walls continued in blissful ignorance. Because the city had remained untouched for so long, its people mistook stillness for security. Tuor and Idril moved with growing awareness. They saw the shadows gather not only in the forests and pasas outside Gondolin, but within the complacency of those who should have been vigilant. Tuor, shaped by years of exile and hardship, understood the signs of impending peril. Idril, wise and attentive, discerned the subtle fears that others tried to ignore. Together, they carried the warning that beauty alone could not defend against darkness. The city council convened, and though Tuor spoke of the rising threat, many dismissed the notion. Human and elven pride alike preferred comfort to foresight. Still, some listened to small voices of understanding that foresight often begins with, because shadows advance quietly, the first defenders must recognize them before the masses can act. The strength of a city lies not only in its towers, but in the perception and readiness of its people. As Dayspacid tension grew unseen, the outer lands whispered tales of orc-hosts amassing, dragons stirring in their pits, and balrogs moving in secret. Tuor and Idril labored quietly, reinforcing hidden passages, warning trusted friends, and preparing contingency plans. In contrast to the city's visible prosperity, their efforts were invisible threads, quietly knitting safety into the fabric of Gondolin. These preparations highlight the delicate balance between visible strength and unseen vigilance. Leadership is tested not only by direct command, but by the capacity to act on insight when others remain unaware. Because Tuor and Idril combined experience, foresight, and courage, hope still lingered among the towers, even as shadows advanced steadily. When night fell over the city, a strange silence accompanied it. The stars glimmered above, yet beneath them the future stirred with unrest. Tuor and Idril stood together, knowing that the hidden city's fate now relied on their readiness, their courage, and the quiet power of insight. If Gondolin were to survive the gathering storm, it would be not through walls alone, but through the vigilance and preparation that only a few could provide. Chapter 8. The Secrets of the Deep. What lies beneath the surface of even the most secure city? Imagine waters running silently under stone, carrying both life and the whispers of warnings. True strength often flows unseen, shaping destiny quietly. Tuor and Idril worked tirelessly, exploring hidden paths and tunnels within Gondolin. Every arch, every passage, became a thread connecting vigilance to safety. Because the city relied on visible walls, these secret ways were nearly forgotten, yet they could preserve countless lives when the moment came. Knowledge, they understood, is as vital a defense as steel or stone. Their efforts were not in vain. They discovered chambers long abandoned, passages forgotten by even the oldest guards, and watersheds that could serve both for defense and as escape routes. Moreover, each discovery strengthened their resolve. Every stone moved, every tunnel secured, became a silent testimony to foresight and responsibility. In contrast to the city, is ce visible grandeur. These unseen preparations carried the weight of survival. At night, Tuor would stand overlooking the city, thinking of Omo's voice and the warnings that had brought him here. The hidden ways reflected the deeper currents of fate itself, and he realized that leadership is as much about listening and preparing as it is about commanding. Because danger advances in shadows, those who anticipate it can turn what seems invisible into protection. Idril, too, felt the tension beneath Gondolin's splendor, while the streets sang with song and laughter. Her mind mapped secret routes, examined vulnerabilities, and considered the steps needed if the city were ever threatened. Her foresight was quiet, patient, and deliberate. Unlike those distracted by comfort and beauty, she prepared for moments when action must replace celebration. Together, Tuor and Idril strengthened both the city and its spirit. They reminded themselves, and those who might listen, that true power is often unseen. The safety of Gondolin depended not only on towers and soldiers, but on insight, preparation, and the courage to act before calamity strikes. As dusk fell over the hidden city, the knowledge of unseen ways brought both hope and solemnity. Leaders are defined not merely by the battles they fight in view of all, but by the quiet, unseen choices that safeguard life when the world looks away. If Gondolin were to withstand the shadows gathering beyond its walls, these hidden paths would be its salvation, a testament to foresight, courage, and enduring wisdom. Chapter 9. Whispers of Betrayal. How can loyalty survive when shadows creep within even the most trusted walls? Imagine a song of celebration interrupted by a whisper that spreads doubt and unease. Leadership, after all, is tested not only by open attack, but by deceit that grows unseen. Though Gondolin thrived in splendor and harmony, not all hearts were true. Rumors and secrets moved quietly among its inhabitants, carried by fear, envy, and ambition. Tuor and Idril, ever watchful, sensed the currents of unease. The city's outer defenses were strong, but the inner walls of trust and fidelity required vigilance. Because betrayal often comes from within, understanding the heart of the city became as crucial as guarding its gates. Tuor reminded himself that strength alone could not preserve Gondolin. Insight and discernment were equally vital. The lessons of exile, loss, and endurance had taught him that danger often masquerades as comfort. Idril, attentive and wise, noticed subtle shifts, conversations left unfinished, glances exchanged, and decisions questioned. Together they mapped not only hidden paths, but also hidden intentions, preparing to act if trust failed where towers could not defend. Despite these undercurrents, life in Gondolin continued. Festivals sang of triumphs long past, crafts flourished, and the city's beauty captivated all who walked its streets. Yet beneath the glittering surface, the unseen tensions threatened to unravel order. Because vigilance must balance hope and fear, Tuor and Idril moved cautiously, guiding those who could be trusted while quietly observing the rest. When the first signs of betrayal became undeniable, the challenge crystallized: how to act decisively without spreading panic or weakening morale. Leadership demanded clarity and courage, but also subtlety. Every choice mattered, for the city's safety now depended not only on foresight, but on the ability to discern friend from foe in an environment where appearances could deceive. In the quiet nights, Tuor and Idril prepared contingency plans, reinforced hidden passages, and ensured that those who could act in secret were ready. Their vigilance reminded them that true leadership is tested in calm as much as in storm. The whispers of betrayal were a warning, a lesson that beauty and strength alone cannot guarantee survival. If Gondolin was to endure, its leaders and defenders would have to act with courage, wisdom, and foresight. Shadows, though silent, were gathering, and the city as fate now hinged on the quiet but decisive actions of those who understood what others could not see. Chapter 10. The Rising Storm. How can peace endure when the winds of war gather beyond the horizon? Imagine a sky that once promised calm darkening with unseen threats, each cloud a warning that preparation alone may not be enough. True leadership, then, is not only in vigilance, but in the courage to confront what others refuse to acknowledge. The outer lands of Beleriand churned with the movements of Morgoth's servants. Orcs, spies, and monstrous beasts advanced in stealth, testing the boundaries of Gondolin is a concealment. Tuor and Idril felt the tension, knowing that the city's beauty and hidden passages could delay but not defeat what was coming, because destiny often moves unseen. Awareness alone was insufficient. Action had to follow insight. Gondolin preparations intensified. Secret routes were strengthened, and trusted defenders were trained to respond swiftly. Yet even as plans were laid, the weight of inevitability pressed on their minds. The city's pride and long-standing peace tempted many to ignore the signs, clinging to comfort while the storm gathered. Tuur reminded himself and Idril that leadership demands clarity and courage, especially when fear tempts inaction. Tensions among the people began to show. Anxiety whispered through streets and halls, unspoken yet palpable. Festivals continued, but the laughter was tinged with uncertainty. Those in power debated timing and strategy, while those unaware of danger remained blissfully ignorant. In contrast, Tuur and Idril moved with purpose, coordinating silent preparations, ensuring that the hidden paths and contingency plans would serve their purpose when most needed. The first signals of attack arrived not with trumpets, but with subtle disturbances in the land. Distances that seemed secure were breached, and distant sounds hinted at movements too vast to ignore. Leaders and defenders alike recognized that the final test had begun. Because vigilance and preparation had been continuous, Gondolin could act with foresight. Yet the challenge remained monumental. Could secrecy, courage, and insight withstand the coming tide? As night fell over the hidden city, the storm's approach was unmistakable. Clouds gathered over the peaks, winds whispered through the valleys, and an unseen drumbeat of war echoed in the hearts of those who could perceive it. Tuur and Idril stood together, understanding that the moment of trial had arrived. The fate of Gondolin depended not only on walls, towers, and soldiers, but on the leadership, foresight, and courage of those willing to act when the world itself seemed silent. If the city was to survive, action could not be delayed. Shadows would rise, but preparation, vigilance, and decisiveness would be the only defenses strong enough to meet the storm. Chapter 11. The fall begins. What marks the turning point? When even the best preparations are tested, imagine a quiet morning shattered by distant echoes, a calm that conceals the first tremors of catastrophe. Leadership is defined not in the moment of calm, but in the response to sudden upheaval. The servants of Morgoth, long gathering in secret, finally moved against Gondolin. Orcs poured through the hidden valleys, and dark banners appeared on distant hills. Tuur and Idril, who had spent years preparing for this inevitability, took their positions with solemn resolve. The city's hidden ways, secret tunnel, and foresight of the leaders offered some advantage, yet the sheer force of the enemy pressed relentlessly. Gondolin, panic and disbelief spread. Many had trusted in walls and beauty alone, underestimating the scope of the threat. Tuur and Idril moved among defenders, directing, guiding, and reinforcing the city's resistance. Because true leadership combines foresight with decisive action, they became the calm amid the chaos, ensuring that as many lives as possible could be saved. The clash was intense. The city's towers rang with alarm, and streets echoed with the sounds of battle. The hidden passages served their purpose, carrying civilians and warriors alike to safer positions. Yet even as plans unfolded, the relentless pressure of Morgoth's forces revealed the limits of preparation. The beauty and pride of Gondolin faced their first true trial. Amidst the chaos, Idril's foresight shone. She led groups through secret passages, preventing complete annihilation and preserving the thread of hope. Tuur, armed with courage and experience, coordinated defenders to hold key positions, in critical time. Every choice mattered. Hesitation could mean disaster, and yet their calm and decisive action allowed fragments of the city to survive. The fall had begun, but not all was lost. Because leadership had been patient and preparation thorough, survival remained possible. Gondolin's fate would be determined by courage, foresight, and the ability to act in the shadow of overwhelming adversity. As the smoke rose over the valley and the city's glory faced destruction, Tuur and Idril understood the lesson that history always teaches. Beauty and strength alone cannot preserve a people. Only vigilance, foresight, and the courage to act in darkness can withstand the storm. Chapter 12. The Last Flight. How does hope survive when all seems lost? Imagine the city of white towers burning under the shadow of darkness, yet a few hearts steadfast, carrying courage and foresight beyond the walls. Leadership, once again, is defined not by glory, but by the strength to guide when destruction reigns. As Gondolin fell, Tuor and Idril moved swiftly, guiding those who could follow them into the secret passages prepared over years. Each step was measured, every decision crucial. Because foresight and preparation had been their guiding principles, many lives were spared, even as the city succumbed to fire and ruin. The hidden ways, once a quiet promise, became lifelines through smoke and chaos. Idril's calm courage inspired those around her. She led children, elders, and warriors alike through passages carved in secrecy, ensuring that despair did not overwhelm the hearts of the fleeing. Tuor, bearing the weight of Olmo's guidance, coordinated their movements, directing groups and safeguarding paths that might otherwise have been lost. Leadership now was action, swift and unhesitating, even when fear threatened to perish. Beyond the walls, the survivors emerged into the uncertain lands, carrying memories of beauty, loss, and the lessons learned in the shadow of Gondolin's fall. The city itself, magnificent and tragic, stood as both a warning and a testament that strength without vigilance and pride without foresight can vanish when faced with relentless evil. Yet courage, foresight, and preparedness endure through those who act upon them. The flight from Gondolin was not only an escape, but a lesson. True leadership, Teirali said, is measured by the choices made in the face of inevitable darkness. It is foresight paired with action, courage combined with care, and the quiet determination to protect life, even when the world burns around you. As the survivors moved into the wilds beyond the mountains, Tuor and Idril reflected on the city that had been, and the legacy that must continue. Their actions had preserved hope, proving that even in the fall of the greatest city, the principles of vigilance, courage, and preparation can guide the living to a new beginning. If Gondolin's story teaches anything, it is that leadership is not found in unchallenged glory, but in the courage to act when all else is lost. Chapter 13. Legacy Beyond Ruin. What remains after fire has consumed stone and silence replaces song? Imagine survivors walking forward with nothing but memory, yet carrying lessons stronger than walls ever were. Leadership does not end with loss. It transforms into responsibility for what comes next. Beyond the fallen city, Tuor and Idril led the remnants of Gondolin through hardship and uncertainty. The journey was slow and painful, marked by grief for what was lost, yet guided by the wisdom earned through suffering. Because foresight and courage had saved them once, those same principles now shaped their future. Survival was no longer about secrecy alone, but about unity, trust, and resilience. The memory of Gondolin lived within them not merely as a tale of beauty destroyed, but as a lesson carved deep into their hearts. Pride without vigilance had led to ruin, yet preparation and calm leadership had preserved life. Tuor spoke little, but his actions reminded others that leadership is lived daily through responsibility, not declared through titles. Idril, steady and perceptive, ensured that hope did not fade into despair. As time passed, the survivors began to rebuild purpose, if not walls. They shared stories of the hidden paths, the courage shown in darkness, and the choices that saved many when all seemed lost. These stories became warnings and guides for future generations. Because memory shapes destiny, the fall of Gondolin became a teacher rather than an ending. In this way, Gondolin did not truly perish. Its spirit endured through those who learned from its rise and fall. Leadership, vigilance, and foresight continued as living values, carried forward by people who understood their cost. If the city's stones had fallen, its lessons stood firm. The true legacy of Gondolin was not its towers or treasures, but the understanding that greatness must be guarded by humility, preparation, and courage. And so the survivors moved forward, not as victims of ruin, but as bearers of wisdom, proof that even after the greatest fall, purpose can rise again. Chapter 14. Wisdom Carried Forward. What is the purpose of survival if its lessons are forgotten? Imagine a path stretching into the unknown, walked by those who carry not gold or stone, but understanding earned through loss. Leadership, at its highest form, becomes memory shaped into guidance. The survivors of Gondolin did not merely flee destruction, they carried its meaning with them. Every hardship on the road ahead reminded them of what vigilance could save and what complacency could destroy. Because suffering had sharpened their vision, they learned to watch the world more closely, to question comfort, and to prepare even in times of peace. The fall of the city became a compass, pointing not backward in grief, but forward in wisdom. Tuur's journey did not end with escape. His life became a quiet lesson in responsibility, showing that true leaders do not abandon their people after crisis passes. Idril's foresight lived on through the choices others began to make. Careful planning, shared responsibility, and courage balanced with compassion. Leadership was no longer the command of one voice, but a shared understanding carried by many. Stories of Gondolin spread beyond those who had lived within its walls. They were told not as legends of glory alone, but as warnings wrapped in beauty. Because stories shape generations, these accounts taught others that strength without awareness is fragile, and that preparation born of wisdom can preserve hope even against overwhelming darkness. Time softened grief, but it never erased the lesson. The memory of Gondolin became a quiet guardian, reminding future leaders that greatness must be protected by humility, foresight, and moral courage. The city's fall was no longer merely a tragedy. It was a foundation upon which wiser choices could be built. Thus, Gondolin endured not in stone, but in thought and action. Its wisdom traveled farther than its walls ever could. If leadership means guiding others toward a future stronger than the past, then Gondolin succeeded at last, living on as a lesson that light can survive darkness when wisdom is carried forward. Chapter 15. The Measure of True Leadership. What finally defines a leader when history has closed its pages on victory and defeat alike? Imagine standing at the edge of memory, judging not by triumphs displayed, but by lives protected, lessons preserved, and futures made possible. True leadership is measured not in moments of glory, but in lasting impact. The tale of Gondolin, when viewed from afar, revealed a simple but demanding truth. Leadership is a responsibility carried long before danger arrives and long after it has passed. The city's fall was not caused by weakness alone, nor was survival achieved by strength alone. It was foresight, courage, humility, and preparation that separated ruin from hope. Those who understood this carried Gondolin forward in spirit, even when its stones were dust. Tuur and Idril stood as enduring examples of this truth. They did not rule through command or fear, but through awareness, patience, and action taken at the right moment. Their leadership was quiet, often unseen, yet profoundly effective. Because they listened before they spoke and prepared before others believed preparation necessary, their choices preserved lives when no wall could. The lesson extended beyond individuals. Gondolin itself became a symbol for every society that grows comfortable within its success. Beauty invites pride, peace invites neglect, and neglect invites downfall. Yet wisdom can interrupt this cycle. When leaders choose vigilance over vanity and responsibility over comfort, they transform tragedy into instruction rather than repetition. For those who inherited Gondolin's story, leadership became a shared duty. Each generation carried the responsibility to remember, to question ease, and to prepare for uncertainty. In this way, the city's fall served not as an ending, but as a reminder that greatness must always be guarded by wisdom. If the story of Gondolin offers one final measure, it is this. Leadership is proven not by how high a city rises, but by how many lives endure when it falls. To lead is to see beyond the present moment, to act with courage before applause, and to ensure that even in loss, humanity moves forward stronger than before. Chapter 16. When stories become responsibility. What is the final purpose of a story once it has been told? Imagine a reader closing the last page, not with satisfaction alone, but with a quiet obligation awakening within. The highest form of storytelling does not end in memory. It begins in responsibility. The story of Gondolin does not belong only to the past. It lives wherever people build walls and believe them unbreakable. wherever comfort dulls vigilance, and wherever leaders mistake pride for permanence. Its fall speaks across time, reminding every generation that greatness is never guaranteed and survival is never accidental. Because history repeats its lessons to those who refuse to learn, Gondolin stands as a mirror rather than a relic. What Tuor and Idril embodied was not heroism and spectacle, but leadership and conscience. They listened when others dismissed warnings, prepared when others celebrated, and acted when others hesitated. Their choices reveal a truth often ignored. Leadership is not a moment, but a pattern of decisions shaped by foresight, humility, and care for others. Such leadership rarely commands applause, yet it determines who lives to see tomorrow. The reader, too, becomes part of this story. Every society faces its own hidden tunnels, rising storms, and whispered betrayals. The question is never whether danger exists, but whether awareness and responsibility will rise before collapse arrives. Gondolin's lesson demands engagement, asking each generation to examine how it leads, prepares, and protects. Stories endure because they ask something of us. Gondolin asks for vigilance over vanity, preparation over pride, and wisdom over comfort. It challenges leaders not to wait for ruin before acting, and challenges communities to value foresight as much as strength. In doing so, it transforms tragedy into guidance. Thus, the Fall of Gondolin reaches its true ending here, not in ashes, nor in escaby, but in understanding. If its story inspires even one leader to act earlier, one society to listen more closely, or one generation to prepare more wisely, then Gondolin has not fallen in vain. Stories become responsibility when they change how we choose to lead, and in that responsibility, Gondolin lives on. Chapter 17. The Choice That Remains. What choice endures after every lesson has been learned? Imagine standing where a story meets life, where knowledge offers no shelter unless it is used. The final test of any tale is not what it teaches, but what it asks us to choose. After Gondolin's fall had become memory and wisdom, a quieter truth remained. Every generation faces the same crossroads. Walls rise again, cities flourish, and confidence returns. Yet beneath renewal lies the same question: will vigilance fade once safety feels secure? The lesson of Gondolin insists that awareness must be renewed constantly, or history will reclaim its patterns. Leadership, then, becomes an ongoing decision rather than a title inherited. It is chosen in moments when warnings are inconvenient, when preparation feels excessive, and when humility challenges pride. Tuor and Idril's legacy was not perfection, but persistence, the willingness to choose responsibility again and again, even when others turned away. Communities, like individuals, reveal their values through choices made before crisis. When foresight is welcomed, survival gains allies. When comfort dominates, collapse quietly prepares its return. Gondolin's memory stands as a gentle but firm reminder that prevention is less dramatic than rescue, yet infinitely more powerful. For the reader, the choice is immediate and personal. To dismiss the story as distant myth is easy. To accept its challenge is harder. It asks us to examine how we listen, how we lead, and how we prepare not after danger arrives, but now, while time still allows intention to become action. Thus, the story's final offering is not an answer, but a choice. Gondolin has spoken through ruin and wisdom alike. Whether its lesson becomes repetition or renewal rests not with the past, but with those who stand in the present. In choosing vigilance over vanity and responsibility over ease, we decide whether the Fall of Gondolin remains a tragedy or becomes a turning point.